If you glance at the current issue of Time magazine, you'll notice that it's a special issue devoted to identifying the 100 most influential people in the world. The cover features an artful display of an oversized number 100, along with a sampling of some of the names and faces of the 100 most influential people in the world. The name your eye first falls upon, located below the title of the magazine and above the name Hillary Clinton, is Tim Tebow. Even if you've heard of Tim Tebow, and perhaps especially if you have, you might think him a curious choice as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. By profession, he's a quarterback, and by confession, he champions a form of evangelical faith known as muscular Christianity. When Tebow was in utero, his mother risked her own life by deciding not to have a medically advised abortion. He's become a poster child for people who think, perversely, that his mom shouldn't have been the one who made the decision. He and his 3 siblings were homeschooled. He's also become a poster child for that approach to education. An outstanding athlete in high school and college, Tebow won the Heisman Trophy, college football's most coveted award. He also invented the strategy of inscribing Bible references in eye black under his eyes, a practice that has since been outlawed. Tebow recently signed with the New York Jets after a stint with the Denver Broncos. It's fair to say that his reputation as a pro quarterback remains in formation. Some experts think his scrambling style of play and, more importantly, his baseball style of throwing do not translate well into the pro game. Time will tell. In the meantime, he's a curious choice as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. What does Time magazine mean by influential? Managing editor Richard Stengel explains that the word influence originates from the medieval idea that a magical liquid emanates from the stars to influence our actions on earth. He continues, modern influence comes from the magical ability of technology and social media to overcome time and distance and reorder our perceptions. Influence was never easier or more ephemeral. The Time 100 list, he concludes, is about the infinite possibilities of influence and the power of influence to change our world. Stengel could have added, of course, that the word influenza comes from the same root. The once mysterious ability of disease to spread across the earth. Truth be told, the deleterious forces of hatred, bigotry, envy, and greed can spread just as rapidly as their opposites. The question, it seems, isn't whether influence happens, but by whom? Who is doing the influencing and who is being influenced? Who's got the magic and who doesn't? As it turns out, this division of the world into those who influence and those who are influenced, while appealingly simple, is mostly wrong. Alan Watts, who died about 40 years ago, was one of the most widely read philosophers of the 20th century. He was best known as the leading Western interpreter of Eastern philosophy, especially Zen Buddhism. In 1971, Watts recorded a half-hour television program titled A Conversation with Myself. The program features Watts wandering alone the hills and valleys of a remote region in California. He had been living there for some months, he tells the camera, to absorb an atmosphere different from the city in order to discover the essential difference between the world of nature and the human world. The difference between the two, he suggests, is one of style, like the difference between Picasso and Rembrandt. In a similar way, there is a difference of style between the things human beings do and the things nature does, even though human beings are themselves part of nature. On the one hand, Watts says, nature is wiggly. Everything wiggles. The outline of the trees, the shape of the hills, the way the wind brushes the grass, the contour of the clouds, the track of the stream, it all wiggles. Human beings, on the other hand, find all this wiggliness too complicated. We want things to stop wiggling so we can measure them and map them. Keep still, we say. Hold on. Let's straighten things out. Let's get it ironed out. Let's get it squared away. Wherever human beings have been around and done their thing, Watts observes, you find rectangles. We live in boxes. Our streets are laid out in grid pattern. We think we understand things when we have translated them into straight lines and squares. The problem, Watts says, is that we're trying to translate something that is vastly complicated, the world of nature, into terms that are crude enough and simple enough that the human mind can comprehend them. In fact, human beings are just as wiggly as nature. Our brains, for example, are an incredible mess of wiggles. Yet, by comparison to the world of nature, the human brain is relatively simple. The brain is a network of interconnected neurons, and each of those neurons sends a simple signal. Yes, no, on, off. But plants, birds, and trees are each far more complicated than a neuron, and there are billions upon billions of them. And besides, all the elements of the natural world form a network. Flowers and bees, for example, are interdependent. Where there are no flowers, there are no bees. And where there are no bees, there are no flowers. The natural world is really one organism, Watts insists. Everything in nature depends on everything else. The many patterns of interconnection lock together in a single unity. But here's the astounding element. I am part of the unity, he says. In this vast and amazing universe, I'm like a flower in a field. When you see a flower in a field, it's actually like the whole field is flowering, because the flower couldn't exist in that particular place without the rest of the field. You only find flowers in places where they have surroundings that will support them. In the same way, you only find human beings on a planet of this kind, with an atmosphere of this kind, and a temperature of this kind supplied by a convenient neighboring star. Just as the flower is a flowering of the field, Watts says, I feel that I'm a peopling of the whole universe. I seem to be a center at which the entire energy of the universe realizes itself or comes alive, a sort of aperture through which the universe appears. In other words, he says, I am related to the universe as a center to a circumference. Each one of us, not only human beings, but every leaf, every weed, everything whatsoever, exists as it does only because everything around it exists as it does. Without the center, there is no circumference. Without the circumference, there is no center. Each individual and its universe are inseparable. Put differently, there is no center of the universe in general. There is only the particular universe of which you are the center, and the particular universe of which I am the center, and so on. There is no place where you can stand idly by while someone else stands at the center. You are the vortex where the entire energy of the universe comes alive. You are the focus of the universe that makes you possible. In theological terms, the first principle of the universe, therefore, is utter dependence. As humans, we are utterly dependent upon the parents who conceived us, the plants and animals who daily give their lives for our sustenance, the trees that give us oxygen, the sun that warms our atmosphere and lights our path. We depend upon governments to provide for the commonweal, upon teachers for education, upon friends for love and companionship, and so on. As the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead once put it, we are dependent on the universe for every detail of our experience. This principle applies to everything whatsoever. Nothing, not people, not flowers, not stars, is what it is strictly within itself. The necessary religious response to the reality of our utter dependence is gratitude, the defining element of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Gratitude links us to the past by revealing to us our identity, how the universe of which we are the center enabled us to become who we are. And it links us to the future by revealing to us our duty, what we owe back to the universe in return. The experience of dependence requires a discipline of gratitude by which we continually become aware of the sources that make our lives possible. Our sense of duty requires an ethic of gratitude which works toward a future in which we become expressions of a well-tended universe.